Hey everybody, it is Tuesday, October 15th, National Hand Washing Day, I'm told. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I hope everyone has clean hands. I'm Moshe Wanunu.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts. Moshe, my hands, you'll be happy to learn, freshly washed.
Freshly washed, literally and metaphorically. We read all the news and read between the lines here so you don't have to. It only caught my attention. You know, I like to Google the days being like other national, international holidays on this day. And now that Olivia's entering toddler dumb and it's like holding her over the sink to wash her hands, it's a process, Jill.
That's why we've just learned to let it go. A little dirt's good for them.
Well, no,
it boosts the immune system.
I totally get that. I mean, listen, I think you start out when they're infants, like constantly, you know, everyone wash their hands. And then at some point they're crawling around on the ground. You're like, you know, they've been at it for a few hours. They're eating food. They're in dirt. It might be time to like do a hand wash.
You know, I'll never forget when my niece was a baby and I was at their house and I hadn't really been around a lot of babies and she was eating an apple. So I guess she was more of like a toddler. And I said to my sister-in-law that the apple dropped on the floor. And I said, do you have like the 5-second rule? She's like, no, it's like a 5,000-second rule. Like there's no rule. She's eating. They're gross. Like they drop the apples. They pick up dirt.
How many days ago did they drop the thing? We could go with it.
But anyway, back to the hand washing. As I was always taught, as my mom says, as a longtime teacher, you teach the kids, sing happy birthday twice. That's how long you should be washing your hands for.
Yeah. And there's a serious reason behind it. You know, global hygiene, important. A lot of diseases get spread that way. So there's an educational component there, despite the fact that it's challenging with the kiddos.
All right, let's get to some news. A follow-up to a story that we mentioned yesterday. FEMA workers responding to hurricanes have to make, quote, operational adjustments as threats against them continue. So what are they doing differently? Humans around the world aren't having as many babies. Some of the efforts to reverse the shortage and what Donald Trump and Kamala Harris want to do about it. In business news, Wall Street continues to break records despite a lot of uncertainty around politics and also major global crises. So why are investors in such a buying mood? To health news, what you need to know about the whooping cough cases currently on the rise in the United States. Moshe, maybe we need some more hand washing after all.
I was going to say, we get to the speed read. More hand washing, important for the whooping cough story.
Panda-monium is back at the National Zoo. We'll explain. And NASA launches a mission to explore whether there's potential for life on Jupiter's moon, Europa.
Go to Jupiter to become stupider. What was the rhyme?
Girls go. I believe it ends with boys go to Jupiter to get more stupider. I forget the beginning part.
I haven't heard the terrible rhyming thing from preschool. Anyway, actually important research being done as we make the 2 billion mile journey to Jupiter.
Plus Moshe is on this day in history.
Jill, the first rule of this On This Day in History is we don't talk about this item in On This Day in History. That's your clue.
I'm guessing this has something to do with Fight Club.
Oh, we don't talk about Fight Club, Jill, except in On This Day in History.
Okay, let's start with a follow-up to yesterday's story about FEMA workers receiving threats of violence in North Carolina. Federal disaster workers have now changed some of their hurricane recovery efforts in the state, including abandoning door-to-door visits. The initial threats emerged over the weekend. The Rutherford County Sheriff's Office said in a statement Monday that it received a call Saturday about a man with an assault rifle who made a comment about possibly harming employees of FEMA working in hard-hit areas of Lake Lure and Chimney Rock in the North Carolina mountains. There has been at least one arrest, 44-year-old William Parsons of Bostic, North Carolina. He was armed with a handgun and a rifle and charged with, quote, going armed to the terror of the public, which is a misdemeanor. He was released after posting bond. The sheriff's office said initial reports indicated that a truckload of militia was involved in making the threat, but then further investigation determined that Parsons was acting alone. Workers from the agency's disaster assistance teams who help survivors apply for FEMA aid and connect them with additional state and local resources have again stopped going door to door and instead are working from fixed locations while the potential threats are assessed. Moshe, I mean, file this under a story that you couldn't even make up. Threats against FEMA workers who are just trying to help people out in disaster zones?
Well, unfortunately, we saw this coming, right? We've seen this in recent weeks with the misinformation, some would say disinformation, spread by people, disinformation being purposefully bad information that you're spreading. And of course, it was the subject of the conversation we had last week with one of the senior officials in FEMA for the Mo News Interview podcast. Now, FEMA says that it continues to be able to support communities impacted by Helene, help survivors applying for assistance. They have more than 1,200 staff on the ground there working in disaster recovery, and they're going to continue to help here. But the door-to-door thing is important because ultimately, while they've abandoned that, going door-to-door, you find out what people need. And you're going to some of these really hard-hit, hard-to-get-to areas. And until they can secure FEMA personnel amid these threats, they can't do that. That's an important part of their job there. Now, this initial warning came from the U.S. Forest Service that's also working down there. They initially sent a message stating that the National Guard had encountered an armed militia that said they were out there hunting FEMA. Now, FEMA and federal officials have had to deal with a number of online conspiracy theories and falsehoods. Some, like that the government is only giving people $750. That's not true. That's an initial payout, and then you can apply for more. But then there's these unfounded rumors like that FEMA is trying to bulldoze neighborhoods and confiscate land, that they're going to bury bodies and not be honest with the death toll, that they're making way for mining operations. It's not even something FEMA's even tangentially related to, looking for lithium deposits in the mountains. There's been a lot, Jill. We talked about also last week, the theories out there that the U.S. government's creating hurricanes and then routing them to certain areas, Republican areas, for voting purposes or to get them not to vote in this election and also to destroy their land and confiscate the land. This is something we saw in East Palestine, Ohio last year. This is something we saw in Maui out of those fires, that these rumors spread very quickly. And FEMA now knows it needs to build a whole operation to deal with misinformation out here. In some cases, you have seen national Republicans get in the mix here. Former President Trump has repeatedly spread some information related to this, saying that FEMA money for hurricane victims is actually being diverted to migrants. There is a migrant program that comes through Customs and Border Protection that's routed through FEMA, but this is not disaster money. That's a separate situation. Trump has also said that the federal government is not helping Republicans, it's only helping Democrats in the area, which is also untrue. And the unfortunate thing is some of these areas hard to get to on a good day. Very hard to get to, if not impossible to get to, given the mudslides that have destroyed a bunch of roads there. And now you have people spreading online and rumors saying the government's trying to take your land. So you have people actually saying to government officials when they arrive, FEMA saying, hey, how can we help? I don't want your help. You're trying to take my land. And so FEMA's dealing with that right now. As far as the latest information, Helene, of course, made landfall back on September 26th in Florida, but tore a 600-mile path through 6 states. 225 people are still confirmed dead. There's just over a dozen missing right now in North Carolina. They don't have a hard number, but they estimate it's somewhere between 12 and 20 based on the latest reports that I've seen. So far, Biden has visited Florida. He visited North Carolina. And then over the weekend, they announced another $600 million in aid for areas impacted by both Helene and then Hurricane Milton that hit last week.
All right, Moshe, switching gears, reversing the decline in birth rates has become a national priority among governments around the world. So from Europe to the United States to Russia and Asia, including in China, South Korea, and Japan. So in the U.S., both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have pledged to rethink the United States family policies. Harris wants to offer a $6,000 baby bonus. Donald Trump has floated free IVF and tax deductions for parents. Europe and other economies that are demographically challenged in Asia, like South Korea and Singapore, have been pushing back against this demographic tide with lavish parental benefits for a generation now. The population replacement rate to keep a population steady is 2.1 children for every woman. The U.S. fertility rate is now at 1.6. In South Korea and other Asian countries, it's dropped below 1.0, which means that the population will actually drop by half in the next couple of generations. Over in Europe, 2 countries devote more resources to families than almost any other nation, and I'm talking about Hungary and Norway. And despite their programs, their fertility rates are 1.5 and 1.4 children for every woman, respectively, which is, again, far below that replacement rate of 2.1. Demographers suggest that the reluctance to have kids is a fundamental cultural shift, not necessarily just a financial one. Falling fertility has persisted among nearly all age groups, incomes, and education levels. Those who have many children often say they would have them even without the benefits, and those who don't have kids say that the benefits don't make enough of a difference.
Yeah, so this is a global phenomenon, something we've talked about on this podcast before. The Wall Street Journal took a deep dive into this in the last couple of days as we're looking at any strategies working in any country here. So they did take a look at, again, Hungary and Norway, which are devoting more than 3% of their GDP on different approaches to promote families, and finding, again, that despite financial benefits here, they're not making that much of a difference. Hungary's actually spent in the last couple of years 5% of their economy, of their GDP, on programs to try to expand families. The U.S., by contrast, spends about 1% of GDP on family support through child tax credits, programs aimed at low-income Americans. So in Hungary, they've tried a number of programs here. Families who pledge to have 3 or more children can get more than $150,000 in loans. Other benefits include a lifetime exemption from personal taxes for moms who have 4 or more kids, and up to 7 extra annual vacation days for both parents. Under another aspect of the program, they also subsidized vehicles, minivans, for the families as well, but have not seen much of an impact. Meanwhile, over in Norway, they've been trying to incentivize births for decades, including a very generous parental leave that we here in the U.S. Would not recognize. New parents nationally, by law in Norway, can share nearly a year of fully paid leave, or around 14 months at 80% pay. More than 3 months are reserved for fathers alone to encourage equal caregiving. Mothers are entitled to take at least an hour at work every day to breastfeed or pump. Norway's Now, while it hasn't helped the birth rate there, Norway's population continues to grow thanks to immigration in the country, and that's always another tool you can use when it comes to population growth. Now, for those of you who ask, and I often get this on Instagram, why does it matter? Like, isn't it okay if the population dips a little bit? Well, not necessarily the way that modern economies are built, at least not in the short term. Long term, we could resolve it, over 100 years. But in the near term, 10, 20, 30 years, as the population declines, you have a lack of working population. Well, that hurts the economy because your working population pays for the pensions, pays for retirees. In a consumer economy like the U.S., where much of the economy is based on people spending money, less people, less spending of money. Housing prices decline because you're not going to have much demand for homes with less people out there, right? Education declines with schools closing. It's a big house of cards, and there's a lot of concerns out there, again, globally, regardless of whether we're talking about authoritarian regimes like Russia and China, whether we're talking about democracies like across Europe, here in the U.S., in South Korea. And again, while alarm bells are going off here in the U.S., we do have, a pretty good rate right now of immigration, both legal and illegal, that is filling the gap. In some European countries, and in particular in Asia, South Korea has the lowest birth rate in the world, and they're trying a whole bunch of stuff. We talked about it on the pod a couple months ago to try to encourage moms and families to have children. And so what's very interesting here, Jill, is further research clearly needed here, because it appears the financial benefits that various governments are coming up with not working. It speaks to a larger cultural shift, and can that shift is a big question.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who just feel like it's not for them. They want the freedom, the independence.
They don't want to have to wash the hands.
They don't want to
3 times a
teach
day.
their toddlers how to wash their hands. They value sleep. There are benefits.
Well, and by the way, reality check here, right? Life has gotten much more expensive. So some people, with the affordability issues say, kids are expensive. And especially in a country like the US, where we don't even have, all these countries trying out all these new incentives, they already have mandatory maternity leave and parental leave. And we're like way behind that here in the U.S. So in the U.S., there's a lot of arguments. People say, maybe I would have kids if the government was a little more supportive. So maybe the financial incentives would be helpful here. But in some of these countries, they're offering incredible benefits to families. And again, people are like, you know what? Not for me right now. And so, we're going to see what the long-term impact of all this is. It's not going to be a short-term thing, but 10 years, 20 years from now.
I think the financial incentives also really come into play when families are deciding whether they want to have more than one kid. Because
Right.
I've heard that from a lot of friends who are like, we have a certain lifestyle right now that we can afford with one child, but if we have a second or a third, we'd have to move. We couldn't do a certain school. Just there are certain reasons why they feel like they just simply can't afford to have bigger families.
Well, in Hungary, when you have 4 or more kids, Jill, lifetime exemption from taxes.
Now you tell me. I'm 44. It's over.
I got to move to Hungary. I got to have 2 more kids. I got it.
This was news that would have been helpful about 15 years ago. All right, time now for the speed read from Money Watch. Wall Street continues to break new records. U.S. stocks kicked off their third year in a bull market, with the S&P 500 scoring a fresh record on Monday. The commonly accepted threshold for the start of a bull market is a rise in stock prices of 20%. The S&P has climbed nearly 64% since October 12th of 2022. It closed at yet another record on Monday, but despite the market climbing to new all-time highs, investors are still a bit anxious against a backdrop of the closely contested presidential election in 3 weeks, suddenly rising treasury yields, uncertainty about the pace of the Federal Reserve policy easing, and escalating geopolitical risks in the Middle East. Most, the one thing that I learned from my many years on Wall Street is that, number one, no one really knows why the market falls or climbs for the most part. Everyone's guessing. But markets really hate uncertainty. So it is pretty wild that we're still in such a bull market, given how much uncertainty there is right now, as I just mentioned, from politics to wars, et cetera.
Yeah, the thing is, at some point, the market's going to decide what they think the result will be. And I don't know if everyone remembers, but there was a moment there because the market was surprised by the Trump win in 2016, where the market sort of collapsed overnight and then recovered a couple days later because it wasn't priced in. A Hillary Clinton victory was priced in. So they had to sort of recalibrate, if you will. So it'll be interesting to watch what we think Wall Street decides, who they decide the winner will be, and the impact there around Election Day. But of course, you mentioned Fed policy, interest rates, the Middle East, of course, a lot of things to watch. Now, we have entered year 3 here of a bull market. The typical bull market lasts 5.5 years, if you look historically here. Over the last century. So it'll be interesting to see, if there is some sort of immediate correction here. If you look at the last 11 bull markets since 1947, all of them that celebrated their second birthday had at least a decline of 5% or more in the subsequent 12 months. So will that be in the immediate 12 months? Will that be a year from now? That's unclear, but that's something to watch for. But at the end of the day, if you invest in the market, you're there for the long term. I've put up this chart on Instagram a lot. If you look at the last 40 years of the market, there's only a handful of years where the market went down. Typically, you go up anywhere between 5% to 20%, depending on the year here. So ultimately, if you're an experienced investor, to hold, depending on what happens, unless you're facing immediate retirement or you need immediate cash needs, and then you might have to make a decision at some point to pull out. But I am not, I should repeat, a financial advisor. I'm just here as a journalist telling you what the financial advisors tell me. One stock, Jill, as we talk about the markets here that we're always watching, NVIDIA, the chip maker that was at one point this year the most valuable company in the world, sort of broke out of nowhere, and then the stock went down. That's back up at a record high, Jill. It is now the second most valuable company, publicly traded company in the world now, valued at $3.4 trillion. The stock is up 180% for the year. It's up 9x over the past 2 years. Just behind Apple. Apple now worth $3.55 trillion. They're doing okay there at Apple.
Most the other question that people always ask, is it too late to get into NVIDIA? And Scott Galloway, who I quote all the time on this podcast, will say, I have no idea. It could drop, it could plunge tomorrow, or it could double in value tomorrow.
No idea. All I know is it's a chip maker, really good making chips for AI. AI seems to be the future. Is it overvalued? Perhaps. Is it undervalued and could it double again? Perhaps. Guys, it's like a slightly better version of playing the lottery there.
All right, to some health news. This from ABC News. Cases of whooping cough, also known as pertussis, are on the rise, according to some new data from the CDC. About 18,000 cases of whooping cough, with the highest number in the mid-Atlantic states, have been reported as of the week ending on October 5th, according to the most recent data. This time last year, there were only about 4,000 cases, about a 5-fold increase since a year ago. Whooping cough spreads through coughing and sneezing and impacts the body's cilia, causing swelling in the airway. The CDC notes that babies under the age of 1 and anyone with a compromised immune system or moderate to severe medically treated asthma have the highest risk of developing whooping cough and severe complications from the infection. It can often start as symptoms of a cold, low-grade fever, runny nose, a mild cough for maybe 1 or 2 weeks. And then that progresses into the second stage that includes these violent coughing attacks that often leave people gasping for air, which is where that term whooping cough comes from.
Yeah, a big reminder here, the most effective way to prevent whooping cough is through vaccination. Among kids, that's the DTaP, the diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis vaccination series. Among adults, it's the Tdap. For adults, you should get updated every 10 years. Kids, talk to your pediatrician there. Whooping cough outbreaks typically occur where the populations have the lowest vaccination rates. Right now, if you break down states, Pennsylvania has the largest outbreak of whooping cough right now. In babies under 1, the symptoms may vary. You know, you mentioned the cold symptoms, Jill, with the slight cough for a week, and then that leads to the violent coughing attacks. In small children under 1, it might not come with any coughing at all, but it might come with periods of apnea or when they stop breathing, which is why it's so important to pay attention here. And, you know, when you can first get that round of vaccines, they're super important. So so an early heads up to all of you as we head into the season now, flu season, all the various things that come with winter.
From the Washington Post, Panda-monium is back at the National Zoo. The National Zoo's 2 new giant pandas left China on Monday for their future home in Washington. Less than a year after the last giant pandas left the nation's capital, some worried for good. The arrival of 2 pandas, 3-year-old female Qing Bao and 3-year-old male Bao Li, will resume a beloved animal conservation program in Washington that goes back more than half a century. The bears are being transported on a FedEx Boeing 777 cargo jet nicknamed the Panda Express from China. The zoo has been mum about the pandas' travel plans for security reasons, but according to the FlightAware website, a FedEx cargo jet from Chengdu, China, via Anchorage is scheduled to arrive at Dulles International Airport at 9:55 a.m. this morning.
Jill, it's not hard on the FlightAware website. You're like, Chengdu is the home of the pandas. Does FedEx have any flights? Quick Google, quick FlightAware. Anyway, look for live coverage of the arrival of the pandas there at some point today. Right now, they have veterinarians and zookeepers aboard the special Panda Express plane. They have bamboo shoots, carrots, Chinese cornbread for the flight, as well as water and medicine. But you won't be able to see them immediately. It's going to be several weeks here before visitors get to see the pandas, the new duo there at the National Zoo. Because once they arrive, the bears will be quarantined for 30 days to reduce the risk of introducing new parasites or disease to them, and then they'll get some more quiet time to get used to their habitat and zookeepers. So you're probably, I don't know, around the holiday, early 2025, we'll wait to hear from the National Zoo as to when they will be available for viewing for the public here. And, you know, we told you when the pandas all start to depart to China and there were no new deals, that we might not get pandas back here in the U.S. This is part of a lease program that's been going on since the Nixon administration. That's when things opened up with China. The first giant pandas arrived in D.C. back in 1972 as a gift. But it's always part of a lease deal where the pandas are here for a certain period of time and then have to be returned, and then a new group comes. And for a while there, we're like, oh my God, given how things are going on in China, there's going to be no panda sent here. In fact, there was a whole social media campaign in China, nationalist accounts there saying, keep Chinese pandas in China, stop sending them to the U.S., even though there's a lot of them over in Chengdu. Now, nonetheless, a deal has been struck here. And we should note Bao Li has family roots in D.C. He is the son of Bao Bao. That is the famous female giant panda who was born at the National Zoo back in 2013. So Bao Li has some parents with American citizenship there, if we grant birthright citizenship to pandas, Jill. I don't know that we do.
Moshe, we reporters, we've all been there.
Panda watch. Jill reminds me, if anyone from my CBS days is listening, we put senior White House correspondent Bill Plant outside for a panda story back, I don't know, it was a decade ago. Something was going on. There was a panda birth going on, I think, at the National Zoo at the time. And we were playing a clip of it. And he hadn't seen Anchorman. I mean, he was old school. And so he's hearing it in his ear, and he's like, oh, my God, what is happening? Anyway, I love Bill Plant. He is missed. Unfortunately, he passed a couple years ago.
And finally, from Reuters, NASA launched a spacecraft from Florida on Monday on a mission to examine whether Jupiter's moon, Europa, has conditions suitable to support life. There's a big focus on the large subsurface ocean believed to be lurking beneath its thick outer shell of ice. The U.S. Space Agency's Europa Clipper spacecraft blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center on a SpaceX Falcon Heavy rocket under sunny skies. The robotic solar-powered probe is due to enter orbit around Jupiter in 2030 after journeying about 1.8 billion miles in a 5.5-year trip. Europa is one of Jupiter's 95 moons. It's just a quarter of Earth's diameter, but its vast global ocean of salty liquid water may contain twice the water in Earth's oceans. Earth's oceans are thought to have been the birthplace of life on our planet. Moshe, 5.5-year trip. No longer are my kids allowed to complain about 20 minutes.
Are we there yet? Are we there yet? 5.5 years. Jill, it's not going to be taking a straight path to Jupiter. It's going to fly by Mars and then swing back around Earth and basically use the gravity from Mars and Earth to slingshot and get momentum to Jupiter. That's the route it's taking here. Now, as far as Europa is concerned, you may have heard about it before. Again, Jupiter, huge planet, massive. And it has 95 moons. Remember, we have one moon. So this is just one of their moons. And apparently, Europa has ice that is believed to be upwards of 15 miles thick. And then below that, the belief is there's an ocean that potentially is 100 miles deep underneath that ice. So among the objectives of this mission is measuring the internal ocean and layer of ice there, mapping the surface composition of that moon as it makes loops around that moon, and hunting for plumes of water vapor that may be venting from the icy crust. So it doesn't have equipment on there to be able to actually document life. You have to land on the moon and then drill in to really get a sense of that. But it'll start to give you a sense of whether it has the conditions which life could exist on. So this will be the exciting thing we'll cover starting in 2031 on this podcast. Mark your calendars here. Jill and I will tell you about the flybys, the 49 scheduled flybys starting in 2031. And it'll come as close as 16 miles within that moon's surface, which, Jill, by 2031, we'll have a good sense, I think, of whether we really need us to be able to live on Europa, depending on how things are going here.
Things aren't great, so I'm hoping for signs of life.
All right, finally here on this day in history, we begin in 1952. On this day, one of the most famous kids' books in history was published, Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Comes out on this day, October 15th, 1952. On this day in 1959, the final day of the Antarctic Treaty Conference convened in D.C. After 6 weeks of negotiations. A treaty was signed by 12 countries that preserved Antarctica for free scientific study. At the time, there was a whole discussion, do we all take pieces of land of Antarctica and claim them for our own? And the world decided, as part of an international treaty there, you know what, let's preserve Antarctica for science. On this day in 1990, Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev wins a Nobel Prize for his work to end the Cold War. Over the last couple of years, the 1980s there, he had undertaken a number of domestic policies that basically leads to the collapse of the Soviet Union, viewed very negatively by certain people in the Soviet Union, but led to the end of the Cold War, struck a number of agreements with the U.S. To cut down on the number of nuclear weapons, missiles, pulled the Soviets out of Afghanistan, out of other areas in the world, and so he won a Nobel Peace Prize for that. We end with pop culture and music history. On this day, 51 years ago, country star Dolly Parton releases her famous hit, Jolene, on this day. She apparently was inspired by an 8-year-old girl named Jolene who had asked Dolly for an autograph. Dolly apparently tells NPR that she saw the little girl and said, "You're the prettiest little thing I ever saw. What is your name?" And the girl replied, "Jolene." And Dolly says, "Jolene, that is pretty. That sounds like a song. I'm going to write a song about that."
That is so not what I thought inspired the song based on the actual lyrics.
Based on the actual lyrics, you're like, wait, that was written about an 8-year-old. Yeah.
I also kind of appreciated maybe a country accent you were trying to do there.
I never did saw. Yeah, no, I stay away from accents. I do many things well. Accents are not one of them. All right, turning 25 years old today, on this day in 1999, Jill got it. She got the clue at the beginning. Fight Club premiered, starring Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Helen Bonham Carter, premiered in theaters on this day in 1999. And turning 24 years old today, Curb Your Enthusiasm premiered on this day, October 15th, in the year 2000.
Moshe, who would have thought that Larry David would have been kind of like the breakout star from Seinfeld? Obviously, he was the co-creator and occasionally would appear in some cameos in some episodes. But the fact that his show has been on for so many years and is so successful, pretty incredible.
Yeah, I would say Larry, of course, and then of course I think JLD, Julie Louis-Dreyfus, not done too shabby there in the aftermath of Seinfeld.
Either is Jason Alexander, who's been on Broadway. He was in The Producers. He's had a great career
really. They all
also.
did pretty well. I think Michael Richard, for obvious reasons, had some trouble there.
But of course, Moshe, any opportunity to talk a little Seinfeld, we shall take. All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And review us in the App Store.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you here tomorrow.